All right.
Wow. Let's do this.
Votary podcast, episode 5.
Ooh, 5.
Yes, 5.
5 already.
2 new people with us. Really, it's 3 Burdicks and me today.
Long-time listener, first-time caller.
We have Jamin Burdick and Graci Burdick, and they go together.
And for those of you who don't know, Jamin is my nephew. And we have worked together on and off for 5 years.
Yeah,
Yeah,
2015.
yeah.
It's pretty crazy.
He was brought up quite a bit in episode 1.
Yeah, that's true.
But today, as we sit here on November 5th,
Six.
6th,
Remember.
2020, it's an interesting time. 2020 is an interesting time to be alive, wall to wall.
Truth.
But
I'd say.
right now is very interesting.
We're in the season finale.
This is it?
The first half of the season finale, it seems.
Do you mean like of life or just of
No, 2020.
Well,
This is it, the final episode.
that's up in the air too, as far as I
It's
can
part 1.
That's like the Mayan
Of the
calendar.
two-part,
the
yeah.
2012, everything ends after.
Yeah, no.
Yeah. So we have no intention of getting political or anything like that on this podcast, but just given where we're at, we don't even know who our president is currently.
Mm-hmm.
Well, it's still currently Trump, but we don't know who's going to be president in a couple months. And we are living in an incredibly divided society, and never has that been more evident than this year, where the divides across basically every imaginable line have exposed themselves. And it's rough. And for a lot of people who I think most people would consider themselves this way, they just don't know what to do. They just don't know how to act and what to say and what not to say. And they care about people and they don't want to offend people, and they want to do good things, and they want to try to see people's points on all sides of things. I feel that way about myself. I really don't know how to do that right now, and I'm finding that to be challenging. Obviously, we all have our own opinions of things and what's the right way to go about things, whether that be politically or socially or economically. But it seems like the landscape has gotten so divided to where there's no room for disagreement. It's, if you don't agree with me, then you hate me. It really feels like it goes there so quickly.
Yeah.
And the room for civil debate and discussion and compromise is just like gone.
Yeah.
And so what I thought would be a good topic for us today, just given the world that we're living in, is how do we as storytellers, filmmakers, creatives, writers, what is our role in that?
Yeah.
Like, how do we make it better somehow? And so, you know, our slogan, if you will, at Votary is meaningful stories. Everyone who works here has a strong belief and conviction that powerful storytelling can make a difference and can be meaningful work. And so the question I want to pose to you guys is, how do we do meaningful work in the world that we live in today, and what does it look like?
Well, I'll jump in and say that, you know, what you were just starting to touch on regarding not knowing what to say or how to say it, and then when people do, or let's like take, for example, like a Facebook post, and they're like, I'm going to do it. I put it out there for the world to see. And the next thing you know, there's 80 people that are just chewing their face off for whatever the opinion was. I think that there's just so much disrespect in the way that we see that, the discord, you know, people trying to communicate or trying to say what they believe, and there's a lot of disrespect because we're so stuck on like dogma. You know, I think about it like if someone's sitting there in the room with you, and plenty of people would chew someone's face off even if they were sitting right there, but most people wouldn't. Most people I think, would tend to be a little bit more
vast
quiet
majority.
and be a little more chill and just listen for a bit and be a little bit more respectful. And I think that that's a lot of what needs to happen all the way around is I think the world needs more humility. And I think specifically we need to say, maybe I don't have it all figured out. Maybe this other perspective, maybe I can learn something from it. Because the people that have done that over time seem to be changing the world for a better place. If you look at history, and a lot of people aren't looking at history much anymore, but I love history, and history is stories, right? And I look at fairly loved and respected people in history who would teach by telling stories. And a lot of the times, the stories that they're telling aren't so on the nose, and I think I need to probably use some examples, to where it's dividing people. What I love about good storytelling is when the messaging isn't just beating you over the head with a specific point of view or angle, because then it requires no thinking. Mm-hmm. You're just like, oh, I have to figure out, am I in that person's tribe or am I not? And and that's it. Whether instead of the nuance, life is like complex and nuanced. We're supposed to be deep thinking and like processing and have critical thinking. And so you can't do that without first having a respect for your fellow man and some level of humility to say, I'm going to have this conversation and I'm going to see, and I'm going to be careful with and measured and open. I think, in the 7 habits of highly effective people, like I forget which habit it is. I think it's 4 or 5. I got to look it back up. But it's seek first to understand and then be understood. Mm-hmm. And both sides are incredibly important. A lot of times you'll get one or the other with someone. Someone will seek to understand and then they'll be quiet. And they didn't have courage to be understood. Mm-hmm. Or people the other way around, which is just like broadcasting, be understood. I'm trying to get you to understand me, never seeking to understand, right? Yeah. So seek first to understand, then be understood. You need both, right? So I think that's like something that would help everyone. But I'm interested, going back to your question, of how does that come into storytelling? Well, I think that examining all sides, we make documentaries. That's one thing that comes to mind is like usually there are multiple voices in a documentary, and they have different brains and they have different perspectives, and you're interviewing people and getting these different perspectives. And I think that we have, if it's entertainment that we're making, I think that we have a responsibility to get a lot of perspectives. I think that's probably also true when we're getting paid client work, to do our best to show what a company believes, and you do that with different perspectives. But what I don't like is when it's just too heavy-handed on the nose. Yeah.
I feel like you're touching on like the first thought that I had when we're thinking about this, like what does it take to be a storyteller that is doing meaningful work in this, climate, political climate. And I feel like what you're kind of touching on is this concept that a good storyteller is oftentimes first a good listener of stories. And you have to be able to, for example, as an interviewer, you have to be able to listen to someone's story before you can actually communicate their story and go and edit it, in a authentic and personable way. You have to listen to them first. So I agree with you when it comes to that.
Yeah, I mean, that's listening is an act of humility. Yeah. Right? Just listening.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. And, the old God gave us 2 ears and 1 mouth. Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Twice as much listening.
I think that it's important, too, to evaluate your own motivations and your own what's your end game, you know, like, because you can say, oh, I want to make the world a better place, I want to unite people, whatever you want to say, but in the back of your head or deep in your heart, you could just be saying, I want to win, I want my side to win.
That's true.
And so I think that there needs to be a real, not that you ever compromise your convictions and what you know and believe to be true. That's never the solution. But being humble enough to say that maybe I don't know all the answers. There's a possibility that my side, my camp, whatever, my party is not 100% right across the board.
Yeah.
Because if you're not willing to go into a conversation, go into a relationship or an interaction with someone, saying to yourself, I'm willing to be wrong in this, I'm willing for my mind to be changed, maybe not completely, but I'm open to the idea that I don't know everything, then there's no point in even going into the conversation at all.
It's so hard, though. It's such a, like you're saying, humbling thing, like, because everyone does believe that they're right where they're at. What they believe politically, they think, I understand something you don't. Yeah. I get it, and you're missing.
I've thought about it, and you haven't. I hate. That's the worst. Is like you clearly haven't done your research, or you know what I mean. And it's like there's just so much presumption, attitude. And we all do it. Yeah, of course. So I think that's a big part of where it starts, and it speaks to humility. Is the openness to the idea that you don't know everything. The notion that someone else might know something or have experienced something that you haven't.
I think on a like another side of that, like on a broader scale, as a creative, as somebody that's like putting things into the world, like you were saying earlier, Jed, like everybody needs to understand what their role as a citizen is, and that's going to look different for everybody. Like, not everybody's supposed to be on the front lines. Not everybody's supposed to be in government, you know. Not everybody's supposed to be like, you know, saying this and this and this is wrong, right? That needs to be called out, but we can't all have that role. And I think a lot of the time, our role as a creative is like just to add to the good that is in the world, and you know, and add to, you know, maybe we're not exactly addressing this exact political issue in this video, but it's just causing people to think about these little things in life that are affected by those things, you know, like yeah, I don't know. It's like just having the humility to understand what your role is as a creative, as well as understanding what your motivation is behind everything that you put into the world.
And talking about heavy-handedness too, I feel like a lot of movies, I was having this conversation with, I think, Jono and Mike or one of them, and it kind of, you guys touched on it in the first episode of the podcast about you know, being fatigued by these COVID, like, we're with you commercials. But this like underlying, especially in movies, there can be this preachiness that's just exhausting. And it's like, you can't enjoy the movie. You don't want to be preached at. Like, preachiness in films specifically can be super out of place and not the right time, like exhausting, and it just doesn't fit. It doesn't work.
Yeah, it's really hard too, because the exact medium of movies requires that you dance this line of exposition versus what will the viewer pick up on, or what will they get on their own. And when you go through and start editing, especially a feature, things that you just knew from reading the script, or if you wrote the script especially, like you fill in all these gaps in your mind of what, you know, but the audience doesn't necessarily pick it up. So I can see why over time people are just getting more and more on the nose.
You're like, I just have to clarify this one.
Right, here it is. I'm saying this, right? And so it's the real art of
it's like Avatar.
Great filmmaking, great storytelling is dancing that line appropriately and artistically.
Yeah.
It's like James Cameron was like, I kind of want to do an allegory to like American colonialization and the Native American. What if we did it in space, but they were still just Native Americans? Like, it was so, you know what I mean? And it's just the one thing that popped in my head, not like a statement on the message of the movie.
Great movie, by the way.
Yeah, that's a pretty decent example of still standing for something that you believe in, right? Or like, because as filmmakers, you can't compromise who you are. Every filmmaker has something that they're standing for. I feel like it's an important part of the craft.
Yeah.
Mhm.
Yeah.
But at the same time, there's that balance that you're talking about where, yeah, it can't be too heavy-handed.
Well, I think that there's two ways to change someone's mind on something. And that's either by force, where they just don't have a choice, because
Yeah.
you're literally just, it doesn't matter whether you agree or not, you're being forced to do something or, act in accordance with something. Or you guide them along to a point where they make the realization on their own.
Yeah.
So I think that's the balance right there, is like, if you want someone to understand how you feel or view or think of something, you're never going to get them to that place when you start from a place of a combative posture. When you come to the table as an enemy, then you're never going to get anywhere. But if you come along as a partner or a friend and you come to a place where you are just as much seeking to understand as you are to be understood, then you can kind of walk down that path together, and hopefully you actually both learn new things.
Yeah.
Right? And to me, that's what is so missing. When you look around, when you look at politics, when you turn on any news station, when you turn on any social media platform, there's so little humility and openness. And when's the last time you saw someone say, I don't know about that? You know what I mean? Like, whoever admits to not knowing about something, everyone.
Yeah, or having made a misstep.
Oh my God, we talked about that just in the same context of talking about companies and things like that. Is like, when's the last time you heard somebody say, I'm sorry, I was wrong?
Yeah.
Especially in the public eye, whether it be a politician or a business.
Well, and believed it too, right? Like, that it wasn't a publicity.
Right, because there are the publicity stunts where it's like the PR, the publicist is saying the only way you're going to fix this is go and make a public apology. And it's like usually around some, whatever politically correct or racial thing or something. Trying to somehow keep cancel culture at bay or something. I know this is getting a little political by saying that, but it's true. Like, that comes off as seemingly disingenuous. Disingenuous.
Right.
I'm just like, I'm not buying it,
But
if someone, say a politician or something said, hey, we launched this policy last year, and the data's come in, and it wasn't the right way to go.
Yeah.
And I take full responsibility for that, and we're going this direction. Like, that would be refreshing.
Humility is so attractive, right? Like, it's such an attractive quality when you meet a truly humble person who, like, may even have every reason to brag or assert themselves or whatever, but they don't, and they're willing to listen, and like, that is a huge thing. And I think that's, if there's one thing that I could point to that so many people are upset about right now, is leaders who are not humble. So the moment, because when you start from a non-humble place, you get written off, right? And no one is even willing to go down that path with you and say, like, well, okay, like, what is he really saying, or what is she really saying, and what have they done? You know what I mean? Like, it's just, so you do yourself no favors when you come to the table from a non-humble place.
I have a question from a storytelling perspective. Do you think that there's a problem with your goal going into it being that you want to change someone's mind?
I think if it's the if your total goal, the only goal, is to change someone's mind, that's a problem.
Yeah.
I think that if the goal is to have a healthy relationship, if the goal is to truly show love to the other person,
Yeah.
Or encourage critical thinking in that
encourage
person.
critical thinking,
Yeah.
then you have to model it,
Yeah.
right? You have to model it, and the only way you're going to do that is by being humble and listening to the other person, and actually, and not just listen. Like we all say, "Oh, make sure you listen." No, it's really chew on it and think about it and weigh it and say, "Okay, how do I? If I was to apply that thinking here, 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 and here, am I getting the better results or worse?"
Mm-hmm.
And look at history. I mean, gosh, couldn't we just look at history for a second?
Yeah.
It's like it's a lost thing to just look at history. History is riddled with stories about whatever you want to know about. Whatever you want to know about.
Yeah, we're not the first people to experience whatever we're experiencing.
Right.
Or to be
Yeah.
facing the problems we're facing.
Yeah.
Is there an example that sticks out to you guys that of a story, whether it be a book or a movie or something, that was really effective in changing your mind or perspective on something, or enlightening you in a certain way that you didn't think about before, and did it in that kind of humble way, that where it wasn't just jamming it down your throat?
Well, we were just talking about this the other day, about movies in culture that have a religious message, and how so often religious movies have felt either too preachy or too on the nose, or a lack of something that would draw me in and make me feel entertained is maybe the word to say, engaged. And one that was not that way was my father's favorite movie, and it was influential on me, which is Chariots of Fire. Chariots of Fire isn't a rip-roaring action adventure. It's a heady look at one man's actual life. It's a biopic based on history, but they did an amazing job because he was wrestling with real deep existential questions about what path to choose. And he had different influences in his life. Eric Liddell, these different influences in his life, and one was his sister, and his sister just didn't approve of him running and racing and going all the way to the Olympic Games. And it was tough for her. So there's this tension throughout the film. And even though it's it's pretty, I would say, it's very English. It's very, I'm lacking the words, but it's not, it doesn't have a lot of action. It's not a lot of mystery. It's very, it's heady, like I said.
It's not the most dramatic, even.
Right, it's intellectual. That's the word I was looking for. It's much more intellectual. But even though
there are some exciting moments, though. I mean, when he's running, and
absolutely,
and racing.
and tonally, like Vangelis did an incredible job with the soundtrack. Like it's the most memorable running music of all time, right? Running along the beach. Yeah. But that was a movie that influenced me, to your question, Cody, because that was the first time that I saw a film where I was like, the message of the story, the storyteller's point and messaging throughout it, in many ways it echoed, or it went along with Eric Liddell's feelings, right? They were I can't even tell you the director's name. I should know, but I don't know. But he or she felt, I think, inspired by the things that Eric Liddell said. And it was the first example that I ever saw where I'm like, you can make a great story, say what you believe, and it can just be beautiful instead of like, I hate this, right? Like I've been so turned off by so many different religious movies, and all types of religion, right? Like, but that was a big one for me. And there's plenty of books too, but
there's one book I can think about, which you can, shut me down if this is not okay, but like Mere Christianity by C.S. Lewis. Was written by a former atheist for people who, were against Christianity or did not believe in God, because he saw a need, like a lack of understanding, where Christian language is all up here. It's hard to understand. It's hard to like make you can't really grasp it sometimes, right? And Lewis's purpose for writing Mere Christianity was just to put the gospel in simple terms. And it wasn't like, obviously his hope was like, I hope that this does enlighten people that are struggling with their faith or have closed the door on God. But it wasn't as like, this is why you should believe. It's more like, this is the reality. This is where I saw that there was a lack of understanding between, Christians and atheists, or, and I wanted to fill that gap, that lack, and people could take it or leave it. But at least, he left it out there for people to see. And I think that, like, even for me, having been raised a Christian, like, it answered questions for me that either I was too afraid to ask or I'd never really thought about. And yeah, like, it just brought a lot of clarity to something that, of course, people would have trouble with because it's hard to understand, But yeah, that's one thing I can think about off the top of my head.
So Mere Christianity is actually a great example of that for me as well. I had a very similar experience with that book, and it's a good one to bring up too, because when Lewis wrote that book was made up of a series of essays that he had wrote during World War II, during a time where England was being assaulted, and they were living in fear every day of bombs falling on their heads.
Yeah.
And they were in a desperate place as a nation. Like, no hope. Are we even going to make it through tomorrow? That kind of place.
Yep.
And he wrote that. He was asked to write that book. Actually, I might have misspoke. I don't think it was a series of essays. I think it was a series of radio interviews that were then turned into essays that were then turned into the book. And it was literally just, he was asked to go on the radio and offer encouragement. I don't think he was asked. He was prompted to talk about the tenets of Christianity and to understand it at a fundamental level. Nothing like that. That's just where he went with it. But I don't know. That just struck me that book came out of a time of stress and national and really world crisis.
Yeah.
And very, not apples and oranges where we are now, but similar in terms of maybe an emotional place that people are at, right?
Yeah, the emotional stress that people are, the weight they're carrying, yeah.
I have two examples that came to mind. The movie Unbroken. Did you guys see that?
Great film.
Yeah. That was a great example of just telling a really powerful story and just letting the story be what it was. And there's just so much wrapped into that, and like the idea of radical forgiveness and compassion, and that was one thing that came to mind. And then on the opposite end of the spectrum, the documentary end, Minimalism. I don't know if you guys saw that. I think it's on Netflix.
Yeah.
Seen the cover on Netflix. Scrolled by it.
It's good. It's they do so. What they're doing is they are presenting an alternate lifestyle. But the way that they present it is not like, here are the rules and this is better because of X, Y, and Z. They present it in such a way that, like, look, this is where we were at. This is how we started changing how we were living, and these were the results. And then here's other people and their own journeys in a similar way. And at no point did they ever say, like, this is what you need to do. And it actually deeply impacted me. I actually get made fun of every now and then because I only have like 10 shirts in the world. I actually adopted a lot of the lessons that were in that documentary into my own life about owning less things, like buying less things, being much more intentional with my choices that I buy, and just the value of having less stuff in your life and putting less stock in the stuff that you have and own. That was a really impactful thing in my life, and I thought that was a documentary that towed that line well, where it was, obviously they believed that it was a better way to live. It changed their lives, but they weren't putting that on anybody else in the way that they presented it, and it worked really well for me.
I'll have to watch that one. Did they use a lot of good examples of people who were living that life?
Yeah, they kind of, so it was really cool too, because these two guys, and they actually have a really popular podcast as well as though this one's really popular. It's almost as popular as ours. It's called The Minimalists, but the documentary is set up in such a way that they're being followed along on their tour. They had I think it was a book tour. And they interview people that they come across along the way and get their stories of like their own journeys through minimalism, and it's cool. But yeah, so I think that a good thing to talk about is passion.
Yeah.
Right? And
we've been talking quite a bit about that, about, the pursuit of your passion. Like, what kind of career or lifestyle choice do you make? Or is it worth it to go after your passions?
Yeah. To me, they're hand in hand, right? Because the things that you're passionate about are the things that you want other people to be passionate about, right? They're the things that you.
That's true.
So, if you're not going to try to change someone's mind or perspective on something if you don't care about the thing, right?
Yeah.
And so this question of like, given how divided we are and just the landscape of the world that we're living in, what does it look like to pursue passion? Why do we want to do it? Mm-hmm. Something that brought this up in conversation earlier was I watched the movie this weekend, Crazy Rich Asians. Have you seen it?
I watched half of it. It's pretty funny.
I didn't love it, to be honest. It was fine. I didn't like the movie, but the one thing that stuck out to me in it was there's this moment where the main character meets the mean mom of her boyfriend, who is not accepting of her because of her status and her economic and social status, and she's from America, she wasn't born in China, all this stuff. And the main character was explaining to the mom what she does, and she's like, I'm an economics professor and I'm just like so passionate about it. And the mom says, pursuing your passions, huh? How American. And that line really stuck out to me because it kind of just dawned on me a little bit like, oh yeah, that's not like a universal thing.
It's not everybody.
So true.
Not every country.
Right. Like, I feel like I've grown up thinking like, you decide what you're passionate about, you decide what you really want to do in life, and then you go after that.
Yeah.
And not everybody does that, but that's kind of I feel like a widely understood thing. It's like,
Mm-hmm.
find what you're passionate about, and
Right.
that's common language in America. And it kind of struck me like, oh, that's not everywhere.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Like, and in other cultures, it's much more about duty and doing what's right for the family and things like that. So that
or just survive. You're talking
Yeah.
hundreds or
Yeah.
thousands of years of whatever it takes to survive. Like,
Mm-hmm.
you got to find out what you're good at or what you could get good at, whether you're passionate about it or not.
right.
That's true.
Yeah. So that brought up this conversation earlier this week where, like, wow, so pursuing your passion as even being a valuable thing is not a guarantee, but then the ability to pursue your passion, for that to be an option, is a gift.
Mm-hmm.
That I've probably just taken for granted. And I just, I wanted to kind of bring that into this conversation of like, what does that look like right now?
Yeah.
I mean, and just like with so many other things in life, it's nuanced, right? Because, jumping off what I was just saying about figuring out what you're good at, what you think you're passionate about, you may not end up becoming passionate about it. Like, for sure, we go through changes, but what is passion? Are you born with it? Or what was a career choice that you're passionate about?
Mm-hmm.
Is that just going to automatically be there, or is it influenced by trying a bunch of things, figuring out what you're good at naturally, and you like it? Because you can be good at something and not love it.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, 100%.
Right. But I think that's the magic combo, is finding what you have some natural gifting for and you love it.
Mm-hmm.
And maybe the third would be, is it doing good in the world? Is it being
Yeah.
as effective as you want to be with?
Or at least it's meaningful to you, right? Like you're passionate because it does something for you inside of you. It's like you feel alive when you're doing it or whatever. But when I look at the examples that you guys were bringing up of stories, movies, and books that have like impacted you and like changed your mind, to me it seems like the most successful change your mind type of stories are the ones where the person who's telling the story is passionate about what they're talking about.
Mm-hmm.
It's not just, I learned about this thing and you should know about it too. Like it's something that's just in them, that's
For sure.
they have to talk about it because it's so personal and it just is their life, and when I was thinking about it, one example that came to mind is Chef's Table. We love Chef's Table.
Mm-hmm.
And I didn't really have a lot of respect for the art of like culinary and cooking and all, any of it. And I didn't know how nuanced it was. There, how many different aspects, and styles, and all. Not really. But watching that show, I get pieces of this passion that people have, for
Right.
cooking, and that's powerful because I may not love to cook, but I love to see someone else passionate about it, and that produces respect from me for them, and like that changes my mind,
Mm-hmm.
At what point do you feel, I mean, it's case by case, but do you feel like people pursue their passions for not enough or for too long without getting good results? Or do you think it just pretty much always works out?
It just always works out.
Clearly.
Are you asking like percentage?
Well, I'm just
Like how often?
No, just even anecdotally, I'm just musing about. Like I can imagine that we could invite someone onto this podcast in this moment that would look at us and be like, I spent 30 years pursuing what I thought was my passion, and I didn't get as far as but maybe they have some breakthrough at some point. But I'm wondering what the other perspective is about pursuing passion.
Go ahead.
One thing I've seen is that people don't understand the value of their passion, and like that can be for something as simple as like writing or drawing, right? You don't immediately see a career in something like that all the time, but like the 1 year I did go to school, I just saw these kids that were like wandering around for like their first couple years of college, and they're like, I don't know what I want to do. Like this is a thing that makes sense, but then you like get to know them more, and they're like, oh wow, they're like super talented in like public relations or something, or like even like culinary. Like this is something you are passionate about, and that's something that you have seen as a hobby up until now, but like there's value in that, and you can actually get somewhere with that. I think that people just haven't been taught, like, okay, that little thing that you've called a hobby, you might as well start there.
Wow.
You might as well start pursuing that, and if it
Right.
doesn't end up anywhere,
But maybe
going
there's
to
no
show you-
encouragement to pursue it.
yeah, exactly. I think they just need to know that there's value in it.
Yeah, it's a tricky thing because to Jed's point, like, it's not just as simple as like, well, if you just pursue your passion, you're gonna make it and
Yeah.
you'll be able to survive. Like that is a gift. I feel I never
privilege.
want to lose sight of the fact that
Yeah.
like I love what I do.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Same here.
Um,
And I can remember not loving what I was doing.
Yeah.
Totally,
Right?
me
There's
too.
literally millions of people out there that sit in a cubicle, and it's a big meme, right? It's a joke about like
Yeah.
wanting to leave your job because you just feel like a corporate slave and blah blah blah. blah.
Mhm. Yeah, and it's just not that simple. And it's also, it's not true that once you find your passion, if you are lucky enough to pursue it and make a living on it, that it's going to be all passion all the time.
Yeah.
Like
Yeah.
work is always work at some point, right? Like there's
Yeah.
always going to be parts of things that you don't want to do.
Certain.
But we never really answered your question, I guess, in terms of like, I don't know. I think that even if you know what your passion is, you're lucky, because I don't think that everybody ever really figures that out or finds that, sense of calling towards something. And I am lucky to know that I've felt a strong calling and pull towards filmmaking since the time I was like 12.
Yeah.
So that's just been my experience. Is like I've always known that's where I wanted to go.
Mm-hmm.
Do you find yourself curious about other stuff, or is that a dominant, just stays dominant?
I mean, like, well, I love all things creative, and I feel like that all gets enfolded into the practice of filmmaking. Is like there's room for all creative thought and practice, and so I don't really feel like I'm ever wondering what it would be like to have gotten into another field or something like that. I'm just very happy with the choice that I've made.
I guess that's why I'm asking about the even just having us define passion while we're sitting here, because I can't turn off the curiosity about everything in my brain.
Yeah.
I'm with you on that.
Same.
I mean, the amount of woodworking that I've done in the last year has made me like, I love it, right?
Mhm.
And I never did woodworking before. Some metal work or, design, 3D design, where I'm like laying out rooms in my house and whatnot. Like we just recently
For me,
been doing that.
it's architecture.
Yeah.
Like I'm just fascinated by the, planning, like just the vision that you have to build a structure that's nuanced and different and something you haven't seen before. Like that's fascinating to me.
Mm-hmm.
And yet I don't think that, so I wonder if I would, I love filmmaking. I love it, through and through. But I wonder if I didn't have that opportunity in my life, if I had stumbled upon design or carpentry or something like that, if I would have been sitting in this seat saying, I'm so glad that I'm passionate about carpentry. You know what I mean? Like,
well, here's the thing that I guess this is kind of what I was getting at with my answer is the beauty about being passionate about something like filmmaking or storytelling or writing is that you can enfold any other area of passion into that.
Yeah.
If you're passionate about woodworking and you're a filmmaker,
Totally.
guess what you're going to do? You're going to make films about woodworking. You know what I mean? Like, and you see that some of the most like, the most amazing content that you'll see out there is made by people who just make films about one thing.
True.
Like I'm a surfing filmmaker and their films are like insane about surfing, right?
Yeah.
So that's kind of to my point is like if there's something that I feel strongly about, I can pursue it through filmmaking. I don't need to go become that. So I don't know, that's just one thing that's cool. One thing that came to my mind as Graci was talking was the kind of parable of the Mexican fisherman. Do you guys know that one?
I don't think so.
I'm going to read it just because it made me think of it. So it goes like this. An American investment banker was at the pier of a small coastal Mexican village when a small boat with just one fisherman docked. Inside the small boat were several large yellowfin tuna. The American complimented the Mexican on the quality of his fish and asked how long it took to catch them. The Mexican man replied, "Only a little while." The American then asked, why didn't he stay out longer and catch more fish? The Mexican said that he had enough to support his family's immediate needs. And the American asked, but what do you do with the rest of your time? The fisherman said, I sleep late, I fish a little, I play with my children, I take siestas with my wife, I stroll into the village each evening, we sip wine and I play guitar with my friends. I have a full and busy life. The American scoffed. He says, I'm a Harvard MBA and I could help you. You should spend more time fishing with the proceeds and buy a bigger boat. With the proceeds from the bigger boat, you could buy several boats. Eventually, you would have a whole fleet of fishing boats. Instead of selling your catch to a middleman, you would sell directly to the processor, eventually opening up your own cannery. You would control the product, processing, and distribution. You would need to leave this small coastal fishing village and move to Mexico City and then LA and eventually New York City, where you will run your expanding enterprise. The Mexican fisherman asked, but how long will this all take? To which the American replied, 15 to 20 years. But what then? Asked the Mexican. The American laughed and said, well, that's the best part. When the time is right, you would announce an IPO and sell your company stock to the public and become very rich. You would make millions. Millions, and then what? The American said, then you would retire. You would move to a small coastal fishing village where you would sleep late, fish a little, play with your kids, take siestas with your wife, stroll to the village in the evenings where you could sip wine and play your guitar with your friends. And it's just this idea of like, here's a man who found his passion and was living it out, right? And like, and I don't know, whatever you were saying just jogged that in my mind and felt relevant to like the pursuit of passion versus the pursuit of success. And I know we've kind of gotten off topic in terms of like the landscape of things right now, but it was interesting enough.
Yeah.
No, I think it's relevant. And is it weird of me to love that Harvard MBA's plan? I was dreaming of that IPO stuff. I'm just kidding.
I think the value of having, multiple things that you are passionate about, that you do want to put your time into, is that it all helps you. And I think one of you guys were saying this earlier, is like it all benefits your main focus, right? It's like, as a writer, I can't just depend on my own knowledge, right? I have to be pulling from everywhere all the time. Like, I've learned so much working with Votary, working with Jamin in filmmaking. I've been able to see like the similarities between writing and filmmaking and like the processes and everything, and like there's so much content that can come out of that, right? And without knowledge of like, painting or culinary or whatever, like I wouldn't be able to, enhance my own, like my primary craft, my primary passion. Mm-hmm. It all like feeds into it. So just
Well
something
said.
I've thought about a lot.
I almost
too.
feel like as a filmmaker, your goal and respect has to be just for passion exclusively, not a passion for something, but just for like a passion for passion. Because
Yeah.
as a filmmaker, especially documentary filmmaker, you're getting these inside windows into other people's lives, and your duty is to capture it authentically to them, and then translate that to an audience, right? And so it can't be that you just have to have like that little bit of excitement about their passion, rather than, oh, I love exactly what you're doing. Like, that's cool, but it has to start with like just, I love that you love what you're doing.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I think that us visual storytellers are all a little bit voyeuristic that way, where it's exciting to see this character who's living a life different than ours.
Yeah.
And you're walking along in their shoes kind of emotionally for a little while, or just it's a front row seat anyways. You can imagine what it's like to be them.
Yeah.
And then you kind of replicate.
Yeah.
It's like they're sitting and posing for a painting that you're doing.
You kind of let your imagination
right
run wild with, wow, what is it like to be in their shoes?
Yep.
Yeah. Well, I think passion is contagious. I think that is what rubs off when, from example, like you didn't give much thought or care too much about culinary arts, but then when you saw someone who like it was their life, that you gained a whole new appreciation of it, right? And so to me, that may be the bridge between the two things we've talked about, which is how do we make connection in a place, in a time and country where people are so divided.
Yeah.
What are some things that we can be doing? Like how can we approach our work every day? How can we approach our clients? And what are the kinds of stories that we can tell, and how do we tell them? That's the stuff that, we're not gonna have an answer right now, but that's the stuff that really gets me thinking and going. It's like, I don't want to be the kind of person who is just passive in life, and I don't want to be the kind of person who the world just happens to,
Yeah.
Like, life is too short to not try to make a difference, to not try to make the world a better place, to not try to influence your community for the better. Like, and so if I were to try to answer my own question, I would say it's finding that balance and telling the stories in a humble way, and lifting up the things that other people are doing, and hopefully I think if I think the highest calling right now, the best thing that you could do is humanize someone in the eyes of someone who disagrees with them, and create a context for more empathy and more humility.
That's good.
If we can find a way to do that, then that to me is a huge win.
Yeah.
I think what you just summarized there was a perfect example of the difference between just pursuing your passion and pursuing meaning, like meaningful work. Because, and that's kind of what I was processing earlier when we were talking, is like, I think that for me, when I think about something I'm passionate about and I love it or whatever, so much of that is, I think it's what can be misguiding for, especially for young people who are trying to find their way, is trying to pursue their passion, is that it's self-focused. What's going to give me pleasure?
Yeah.
That's my passion. What's going to let me travel, or what's going to let me make me more money, or
Wow.
what's going to make me look good on Instagram or whatever. I got to find that passion. I want to be a filmmaker or whatever the career is. But what you don't know until you've gone a little ways down this path and experienced a decent amount of pain is that the work that gives your life meaning is work that is lifting up someone else. And that's what you were just talking about,
Totally.
shining a light on
Yeah.
humanizing people who you would first just disagree with, or just not instantly like, oh, we're not in the same tribe or whatever. But meaningful work is work where you that makes it easier for more people to share more love. That's meaningful work. And when you can get outside of your own selfish desires just long enough to feel that impact of that, the positive impact of that, when you walk a little ways through delivering meaningful work, you start to realize that's your passion for meaningful work. Whatever the thing, the craft or the thing starts to become secondary to what the result is, the outcome. It doesn't matter if you're crunching numbers as a accountant or making films or building houses, as long as the result is something that is of great meaning to someone else, then it becomes meaningful for you.
Yeah.
Yeah,
I agree.
totally. Yeah, I mean, I feel like I could talk about this stuff forever. We're coming up on an hour. But I would like to just set a goal for ourselves and hopefully encourage other people who might be listening and watching, is to start looking at whatever you do. It doesn't really even matter what you do. You can do it in such a way that is impactful on others, right? And if it's not in your work, then in the rest of your life, in how you interact with people, how you interact online, how it's like, if we can try to be humble ourselves and encourage humility in others, and to hopefully gain a better understanding of the people that we disagree with, that's the most important thing. Is like, I think that if you really took time to sit and listen and understand why someone is so passionately on the other side of something, then you may never agree with what they feel is the best way to go about it, or what the solution to the problem is. That's not necessarily the point.
True.
Yeah.
The point is that do you care more about that person's well-being than you do being right?
That's right.
And
Or about the relationship.
totally. And in that comes solutions that no one's thought of yet. Solutions where that's where there's compromise, and that's where there's middle ground, and that's where, like, I can help you and you can help me. Like, that's where all of that begins to grow, is out of that being empathetic towards your enemies.
Yeah.
Totally. Nelson Mandela, other greats in history, that's what they've proven.
MLK, my God.
Yeah.
Like, so many.
It's almost a challenge to the American dream in a small way, because that the American dream is so self-focused. It's, I'm going to bring myself up, elevate myself because I have had it so hard. And to think for a moment about how I can put someone else first, I mean, it's the most important rule, right? The greatest commandments.
And the thing that people don't realize is that those dreams that you have of traveling or having more money or a freer lifestyle or more vacation time or not just money, but the things that you're trying to pursue, you get them when you help other people, when you help other people's lives, when you provide meaning for other people's lives. Like if the focus is for those things, you end up coming up short. But you actually end up getting those things.
Yes.
When you are pouring yourself out and creating value for
like
others.
A good example is most really successful companies are first solving a problem for someone else, right?
That's right.
And it's, they're profit focused and all that stuff, but really when it comes down to it, it's what problem are they fixing for someone?
That's right.
So I don't know.
Listen, if you're watching or listening to this podcast and you have thoughts about passion or meaningful work, leave a comment down below, because we would love to get some engagement going with these videos. And if you are interested in filmmaking or if you're interested in storytelling, then also leave a comment about that. We'd love to talk to you about it.
That's the passion train leaving the station.
There it was. Choo choo.
Woo, woo. All right,
everybody.
Bye-bye.
We'll see you next time.
Juices.
Da, 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 da.
Has anyone seen the Kanye West Joe Rogan podcast yet?
Yes,
So good.
I need to watch it.
It's so good.
Fabulous.
When did it happen?